The 80-20 Principle by Richard Koch. Introduction: the rule that changes everything. Imagine this. Out of everything you do each day, only a small fraction truly matters. A mere 20% of your efforts produces 80% of your results. The rest? Mostly noise. This strange imbalance is not just a quirk of life, it's a universal law. It governs wealth, business, time, relationships, and even happiness. It is the 80-20 principle, also known as the Pareto Principle. And once you grasp it, you'll never see the world the same way again. First observed by Italian economist Wilfredo Pareto in the late 19th century, the principle revealed a shocking truth. 80% of Italy's land was owned by just 20% of the population. But Pareto's insight was not confined to wealth. It was a lens through which hidden patterns of power and productivity could be seen. Over time, business leaders, investors, and thinkers discovered that the same rule applied everywhere. A few customers generate most profits, a few products create most revenue, and a handful of decisions shape entire destinies. Richard Koch's The 80-20 Principle takes this timeless truth and shows us how to harness it deliberately. This book is not just about efficiency, it is about leverage. It asks us to stop chasing every possibility and instead identify the few vital things that move the needle. Whether you are building wealth, managing your career, organizing your time, or seeking fulfillment, the 80-20 principle offers a path to extraordinary results with less stress, less effort, and less waste. In this summary, we'll explore how you can apply it to business, money, relationships, and life itself. The secret to success is not doing more. It is doing less, but better. And it all begins with the rule of 80-20. Part 1. Understanding the 80-20 principle. The 80-20 principle, sometimes called the Pareto Principle, is one of the simplest yet most powerful ideas you will ever encounter. At its core, it states that a minority of causes, inputs, or efforts lead to the majority of results, outputs, or rewards. In most situations, roughly 20% of efforts deliver 80% of outcomes. This idea originated with the Italian economist Wilfredo Pareto, who noticed in the late 1800s that 80% of Italy's land was owned by just 20% of the population. Curious, he looked further and found the same imbalance in other countries. Later, he observed that 20% of the pea pods in his garden produced 80% of the peas. In both society and nature, a small share generated the majority of results. Decades later, business thinkers realized that this principle applied not only to wealth and agriculture, but also to commerce, management, and even personal productivity. Companies found that 80% of profits often came from 20% of products or customers. In sales, a small group of clients typically accounts for the bulk of revenue. And in personal life, a handful of activities often bring most of our joy and fulfillment, while the rest drains our time and energy. The power of the 80-20 principle lies in its asymmetry. It challenges the common belief that effort and reward are proportional. We're taught from childhood that hard work equals results, that output matches input. But the world doesn't work that way. Effort and reward are rarely balanced. Instead, most of what we do has little impact, while a few things matter enormously. This means that success is not about working harder, but about working smarter. It's about identifying and amplifying the vital few while minimizing or even eliminating the trivial many. Once you see this imbalance, you can begin to focus on what truly matters.
Examples in business and wealth. In business, the 80-20 principle is everywhere. A software company may find that just 2 of its features are used by most customers, while the rest are ignored. A clothing store might discover that 20% of its product lines generate 80% of its profits. The same applies to wealth creation. Investors often find that a handful of their holdings drive the majority of returns. Entrepreneurs discover that a small set of decisions, choosing the right partner, the right product, or the right market, determine most of their success. This isn't just about numbers. It's about mindset. Instead of spreading energy across endless tasks, the wise entrepreneur asks, what few activities bring the greatest results? What few customers or products matter most? Then they double down on those. Examples in everyday life. The 80-20 principle also governs our personal lives. Think about your friendships. Most people have a large circle of acquaintances, but only a few close friends provide the majority of joy, trust, and support. Consider your daily schedule. Out of all the things you do, emails, errands, meetings, only a few move you closer to your goals. The rest may keep you busy, but don't create lasting impact. Even happiness follows this pattern. Often just a handful of activities, time with loved ones, creative expression, exercise, spiritual practices, bring the majority of fulfillment. Yet we fill our lives with distractions that matter far less. Why the 80-20 principle works? At first glance, the 80-20 principle might feel like a neat coincidence, but it reflects a deep truth about how the world works. Systems, whether social, economic, or natural, are rarely balanced. Power, resources, and outcomes tend to concentrate. A few stars dominate music charts. A few athletes dominate sports. A few companies dominate industries. This unevenness is not random. It is systematic. Once a small advantage appears, it tends to snowball. Economists call this the law of increasing returns. A popular product becomes more popular because everyone talks about it. A talented performer gets more attention, which brings more opportunities, which multiplies their success. The rich get richer because wealth creates more wealth. The same happens in personal effectiveness. A person who masters the skill of prioritizing, the ability to focus on high-value tasks, will create outsized results. Their progress accelerates, leaving behind those who scatter their energy everywhere. The trap of the 50-50 myth. Most people unconsciously believe in a 50-50 world, a world where effort and reward are proportional, where every task matters equally. That's why many of us are busy all the time, yet feel we're not moving forward. Richard Koch, in the 80-20 principle, warns that this is the greatest trap. Busyness masquerades as productivity. We fill our calendars, answer every email, and take pride in being overwhelmed. But in truth, most of that activity is trivial. What if you discovered that 80% of your results come from just 20% of your effort? Wouldn't it make sense to identify that 20% and then multiply it? Wouldn't it be wiser to abandon or minimize the rest? The promise of the 80-20 principle. This is where the principle becomes liberating. Once you embrace it, you can achieve more with less effort, less stress, and less waste. You gain the freedom to focus on what really matters to you, your business, and your life. The principle does not suggest laziness. It suggests leverage. It doesn't tell you to stop working, but to stop working blindly. It tells you to invest your time, money, and energy where they yield the greatest return. Imagine trimming away the unimportant 80% of your schedule. Imagine doubling down on the activities that create results, joy, and wealth. Your life would feel lighter, more focused, and far more powerful. That is the promise of the 80-20 principle. The introduction showed us the big idea. Here, in Part 1, we've understood its roots, its meaning, and its everyday power. In the next part, we'll go further. we'll learn how to apply the 80-20 principle deliberately. Because knowing the rules is not enough. The true magic comes when you use it to design your life, your business, and your success.
Part 2. Applying the 80-20 principle in business. The business world is full of noise. Too many products, too many strategies, too many distractions. Yet the 80-20 principle slices through this clutter with one powerful truth. In business, a small fraction of efforts generates the majority of results. Successful entrepreneurs and companies learn to identify this vital few and double down, while others waste time chasing the trivial many. Take sales, for example. In almost every company, 20% of customers account for about 80% of revenue. This means the most loyal and profitable customers deserve the greatest attention, personalized service, and exclusive offers. Instead of spreading resources thin, businesses thrive by nurturing these key relationships. Think of luxury brands like Louis Vuitton or Rolex. Most of their income comes from a relatively small base of affluent, repeat buyers. They know their 20%. The same principle applies to products. A business may sell dozens of items, but often just a handful account for most profits. Amazon once revealed that a few categories, books, electronics, and household goods, drove the bulk of their early sales. By focusing on these, they grew exponentially. Identifying the profitable products allows businesses to streamline operations, reduce waste, and maximize margins. Marketing, too, follows the 80-20 rule. Only a few channels bring in most customers, while others drain budgets with little return. Smart companies measure and double down on what works, whether it's social media ads, email marketing, or word-of-mouth referrals. Instead of chasing every trend, they refine what already brings the greatest value. Even within teams, not all employees contribute equally. Some individuals drive innovation, inspire colleagues, and close deals, while others simply fill space. Recognizing and empowering this top-performing 20% often transforms a company's culture and results. But here lies the deeper beauty of the principle. It encourages simplicity. Business leaders tend to complicate strategy, piling on initiatives and chasing growth in all directions. The 80-20 mindset asks, what truly moves the needle? When this question is answered honestly, entire layers of inefficiency vanish. Meetings shrink, processes simplify, and profits rise. Consider tech giants like Apple. While many competitors released dozens of products, Apple concentrated on a few: Mac, iPhone, iPad. By perfecting and relentlessly marketing these, they built one of the most profitable companies in history. Focus, not variety, was the secret. The application of the 80-20 principle in business is ultimately about clarity. It forces leaders to see that success is rarely about doing more. It's about doing less, better. Those who master this shift gain not only higher profits, but also freedom. Freedom from overload, wasted effort, and blind complexity.
Part 3. 80-20 and Wealth Creation. Wealth creation, when examined through the lens of the 80-20 principle, reveals patterns that often go unnoticed. Instead of assuming that success comes from endless hard work or from spreading effort evenly across many tasks, the principle shows that the majority of wealth typically flows from a few vital decisions, assets, or strategies. In business and personal finance alike, it is rarely the dozens of things people do daily that create prosperity, but the handful of choices and actions that hold disproportionate power. The idea can be seen in investments. A person may hold a portfolio of stocks, yet a small fraction often drives most of the returns. The same is true in entrepreneurship, where only a few products, customers, or partnerships tend to generate the bulk of profits. Recognizing this reality allows individuals to stop dispersing their energy thinly across dozens of low-impact activities and instead concentrate on the high-yield areas that actually expand wealth. Wealth builders who have mastered this principle understand that saying no is as important as saying yes. They cut distractions, prune unnecessary ventures, and place their focus on the avenues that truly matter. This approach also transforms how time and energy are managed. Many people confuse busyness with productivity, but wealth is seldom the product of endless hustle. It is the outcome of sharp prioritization. A person may work fewer hours, but by channeling energy into the right opportunities, achieve far more financially than someone who works tirelessly without focus. In practice, this means identifying where value is created, who the most profitable customers are, or which skills bring the highest return, and leaning heavily into those. Another striking effect of the 80-20 mindset is compounding. When effort is concentrated on the few areas that yield extraordinary results, returns multiply over time. The small circle of investments, decisions, and relationships chosen with care continues to expand in value, creating exponential growth that outpaces ordinary methods of wealth building. This explains why a small percentage of people often control the majority of global wealth. Their focus and leverage align with the principle, whether consciously or not. At the personal level, wealth creation through the 80-20 principle also demands discipline and clarity of vision. People who scatter their income across countless small expenses often remain trapped in financial mediocrity, while those who allocate intelligently, choosing to invest in assets, growth opportunities, or critical skills, experience an upward trajectory. The principle pushes one to ask, which 20% of my financial decisions will create 80% of my wealth in the future, and then act accordingly. This mindset not only accelerates financial progress, but also provides freedom. By maximizing the return from a small set of high-value actions, one can achieve more with less strain, leaving room for creativity, health, and relationships. True wealth is not simply about accumulation, but about the quality of life it enables. Applying the 80-20 rule ensures that the pursuit of prosperity does not consume everything else, but instead enhances it. Ultimately, wealth creation is not random, nor is it evenly distributed across effort. The principle shows that fortune favors focus and that extraordinary results spring from identifying and nurturing the few elements that hold the most weight. Those who internalize this lesson unlock not only financial growth, but also the clarity and leverage to live life on their own terms.
Part 4. 80-20 and time. Time is the most democratic resource available to humanity, yet it is also the most easily squandered. Every person, no matter their wealth or status, is given 24 hours in a day. What separates those who live meaningful, impactful lives from those who feel trapped in cycles of exhaustion and mediocrity is not the amount of time they possess, but how they use it. Here, the 80-20 principle becomes a compass that guides how time should be invested, showing that only a small fraction of activities truly determine the quality of life and results achieved. In daily routines, the imbalance is striking. Much of what fills schedules, endless emails, unproductive meetings, trivial tasks, consumes hours without yielding significant results. People often pride themselves on being busy, but busyness is not productivity. The 80-20 principle exposes the truth that perhaps 20% of the tasks on a to-do list create 80% of the value, while the majority are distractions disguised as work. When individuals shift their focus to these high-value activities, time suddenly expands. Instead of chasing every demand, they work deliberately on the few actions that matter most. The same principle applies to relationships. Among dozens of acquaintances, only a handful truly enrich one's life, offering support, inspiration, or opportunities. Yet, many people spend precious hours maintaining superficial connections that drain rather than energize them. By applying the 80-20 mindset, one begins to invest time in nurturing the relationships that bring genuine fulfillment and growth, while letting go of those that merely consume energy. This selective focus not only strengthens bonds, but also frees time for what truly matters. In the professional realm, mastery of time creates disproportionate advantages.
Successful individuals are rarely those who grind endlessly without pause. Instead, they identify the crucial tasks that yield extraordinary results and devote concentrated energy to them. For an entrepreneur, it might mean focusing on the key clients who generate most of the revenue, rather than chasing every lead. For a professional, it could be the handful of skills that elevate them far above peers. By recognizing the few things that produce the greatest impact, one can work fewer hours while achieving more significant outcomes. Another dimension of time management lies in personal growth. A small fraction of activities, reading, learning, reflecting, exercising, creates a massive ripple effect across life. Just an hour a day invested in these pursuits compounds into years of wisdom, health, and resilience. Yet people often abandon these critical practices for trivial distractions. The 80-20 principle reminds us that time invested in self-improvement and renewal pays far greater dividends than time wasted in fleeting entertainments. It is also important to recognize that not all hours are equal. Energy and creativity fluctuate throughout the day, and the most valuable periods should be allocated to the most critical work. Many squander their peak mental hours on trivial tasks, leaving the important work for when they are drained. By rearranging priorities, placing the most significant work in the time slots of highest energy, productivity can increase dramatically without working longer hours. The principle also reframes leisure. True rest is not found in endless scrolling or passive consumption, but in intentional activities that rejuvenate mind and body. A small set of leisure habits, spending time in nature, engaging in deep conversations, practicing a craft, provides far more renewal than hours of meaningless distraction. Just as in work, the right 20% of leisure choices create 80% of joy and restoration. Ultimately, applying the 80-20 rule to time is about reclaiming ownership. Life is not meant to be a blur of obligations and minor tasks, but a deliberate design where each hour contributes to something meaningful. When individuals focus on the few actions, relationships, and practices that shape their destiny, time transforms from a scarce resource into a powerful ally. The secret is not to do more, but to do less, selectively, intentionally, and with clarity.
Part 5. The 80-20 Principle in Relationships. Relationships are the fabric of human existence. Yet, just as in other areas of life, not all connections are equal in value. Some people enrich us, inspire us, and open doors to opportunities, while others drain our energy, cloud our thinking, or hold us back. The 80-20 principle reveals a profound truth here. Only a small portion of our relationships contributes most of the joy, growth, and meaning we experience. Conversely, the majority may add little or even cause unnecessary stress. This perspective invites a shift in how relationships are cultivated and maintained. Many people feel compelled to spread themselves thin, keeping in touch with everyone, attending every event, or trying to please countless acquaintances. Yet, despite the investment of time and energy, the returns are often minimal. The 80-20 lens clarifies that true fulfillment comes not from quantity, but from quality, the handful of relationships that deeply matter. Think about the closest circle of friends or family. They are few, yet they often provide 80% of the emotional support and encouragement in life. These relationships bring resilience during hardships and amplify joy during successes. By recognizing this, one can intentionally nurture these vital connections, investing time in meaningful conversations, shared experiences, and genuine presence. Doing so strengthens bonds that truly sustain life. The principle also applies in professional and social networks. Among dozens or even hundreds of contacts, perhaps a small number create most opportunities, whether in business, career advancement, or personal growth. Successful individuals understand this dynamic well. They do not try to be everything to everyone. Instead, they identify key relationships that create value on both sides and commit to cultivating trust, reciprocity, and collaboration with those few. But applying the 80-20 principle in relationships is not only about identifying the most beneficial connections. It also requires the courage to let go of, or at least reduce investment in, relationships that are harmful or unproductive. Some ties are maintained out of habit, guilt, or fear,
even though they bring negativity or drain emotional resources. These relationships consume time that could be better devoted to supportive, uplifting connections. By gently but firmly stepping back from such ties, one reclaims energy and space for relationships that truly matter. In romantic partnerships, the principle highlights that not every detail or every shared activity contributes equally to the bond. Often, a small set of gestures, genuine listening, acts of kindness, moments of shared vulnerability, creates most of the closeness and trust. Focusing on these essentials can transform a relationship, while obsessing over minor issues often leads to unnecessary conflict. Even within communities, whether social groups, organizations, or faith-based circles, the dynamic remains. A few individuals often drive most of the sense of belonging and collective spirit. Engaging deeply with those people and their shared values amplifies the benefits of community, while trying to spread thin engagement across everyone may result in shallow connections. Ultimately, the 80-20 principle in relationships is about intentionality. Life is too short to be consumed by shallow interactions or toxic bonds. By recognizing which relationships create the most meaning and joy, and by investing energy into those few, individuals create a circle of strength, love, and opportunity around themselves. The result is a network of quality over quantity, a foundation that supports personal happiness and lasting success.
Part 6. 80-20 and Life. Life itself can be seen as a grand application of the 80-20 principle. At its heart, the idea suggests that a small fraction of what we do, think, or experience contributes the majority of our fulfillment and progress. Yet, many people live in a state of imbalance, devoting enormous amounts of time and energy to activities that bring little reward, while neglecting the few that hold the greatest potential to transform their lives. When viewed carefully, life is not about doing more, but about doing what matters most. In daily routines, this truth becomes very visible. Most of the satisfaction and energy we feel may come from just a handful of activities: exercising, reading, spending quality time with loved ones, or pursuing meaningful work. Yet countless hours slip away in distractions, obligations, or pursuits that leave us feeling empty. The 80-20 principle calls for an honest assessment. Which actions bring the greatest fulfillment? Which ones simply consume time without offering much in return? The moment clarity emerges, one can begin reorganizing life to focus on the vital few rather than the trivial many. The same applies to personal growth and self-development. Among the many practices available, meditation, journaling, study, mentorship, perhaps only one or two will create the deepest sense of transformation. Recognizing this prevents the scattering of effort and fosters consistency in what truly changes the trajectory of life. A person who identifies and commits to the few practices that bring clarity and strength often achieves more in a year than someone who divides attention across countless shallow pursuits. Health and wellness also reveal this imbalance. While people often chase numerous diets, routines, and supplements, it is usually a few consistent habits, balanced eating, regular physical activity, sufficient sleep, that create the majority of long-term well-being. Chasing the endless variety of trends is less important than focusing on those few fundamentals that consistently work. Even in the pursuit of happiness, not everything matters equally. Small moments, laughter with friends, meaningful conversations, an inspiring book, a walk in nature often bring far more joy than expensive possessions or elaborate plans. Yet society tends to glorify accumulation and constant busyness, pulling people toward the 80% of life that contributes very little to true contentment. The principle invites us to realign values, to recognize that simplicity, presence, and gratitude for the small things yield most of the happiness we seek. Time, the most precious resource of all, also responds to this truth. In an entire lifetime, only a few decisions will shape the vast majority of outcomes. The choice of career, the relationships built, the habits formed. By being intentional in these areas, one gains disproportionate rewards that ripple throughout the years. Neglecting them while being busy with countless minor concerns often leads to regret. The principle reminds us that living wisely means guarding the few decisions that define life's direction. Spirituality and meaning also align with this law. Across cultures and traditions, a small set of core values or practices, such as compassion, integrity, faith, or service, forms the foundation of a life well lived. People may become lost in rituals, rules, or endless debates, but the essence lies in the few principles that create depth and connection. To recognize and live by those principles is to capture the essence of life. Ultimately, the 80-20 principle in life teaches that fulfillment is not about chasing everything or pleasing everyone, but about recognizing the few things that truly matter and giving them the attention they deserve. It is about clarity, focus, and the courage to let go of what is less important. By embracing this, life becomes not only more productive, but also more meaningful, as energy is directed toward what genuinely creates joy, purpose, and legacy.
Part 7. Living the 80-20 Way. The essence of the 80-20 principle comes alive not in theory, but in practice, when it shifts from a concept we understand to a way of living that shapes our choices, routines, and aspirations. To live the 80-20 way is to design life around the few things that matter most, both in work and in personal experience, and to intentionally let go of the distractions that consume time but add little value. At its heart, this way of living is about simplicity. Many people believe success comes from doing more, working longer hours, chasing multiple goals, saying yes to every request. Yet more often than not, this leads to exhaustion without fulfillment. Living the 80-20 way is the opposite. It is the art of doing less, but ensuring that the less you do produces far more. It is the courage to focus deeply on what is vital while cutting out what drains energy or clutters life. One way to embrace this is by identifying the handful of activities that consistently bring joy, health, and growth. For example, perhaps writing, exercising, and spending time with loved ones account for 80% of your happiness. The challenge then is to protect those few activities fiercely, making them non-negotiable in daily life. When the trivial competes for attention, whether through endless scrolling, shallow commitments, or obligations that add no meaning, it becomes easier to say no, because the vital few already command your loyalty. In careers, the same pattern applies. Not every task contributes equally to advancement, impact, or satisfaction. A small number of projects, collaborations, or skills usually drive the greatest rewards. By focusing on those, one can achieve more while working less frantically. This does not mean neglecting responsibilities, but rather prioritizing intelligently, choosing depth over breadth, mastery over busyness. Living the 80-20 way also transforms relationships. Among all social connections, only a few are truly nourishing, uplifting, and enduring. Instead of spreading energy across countless shallow interactions, one can invest in those few meaningful relationships that bring support, love, and growth. The result is deeper connection and less emotional drain. This way of life also extends to material possessions. Many people accumulate far more than they need, yet only a few belongings are truly cherished or frequently used. By focusing on quality over quantity, one finds freedom. Freedom from clutter, from debt, from the weight of maintaining what does not add value. Simplicity, guided by the 80-20 principle, creates space for clarity and peace. Living the 80-20 way also means embracing rest and renewal. A small portion of downtime, whether in reflection, solitude, or creative play, can restore far more energy than constant busyness. Often, people underestimate how much these moments matter. Yet, when prioritized, they enhance productivity, decision-making, and joy across all other areas of life. Importantly, the 80-20 way is not rigid. It is not about strict formulas or numbers, but about awareness, seeing clearly that not everything matters equally, and making deliberate choices to focus on what does. This awareness must be practiced continuously because life constantly tempts us back into the noise of the trivial many. The discipline lies in regularly asking, what are the few things that make the biggest difference for me? And then aligning life accordingly. When lived fully, the 80-20 way is not just about efficiency. It is about freedom. It frees time, energy, and resources to be spent where they create the deepest meaning. It allows one to live with intention, clarity, and purpose, no longer scattered by endless demands, but centered on what brings real fulfillment. The vital few and the trivial many. At the core of the 80-20 principle lies a simple but powerful truth. Life is always divided between the vital few and the trivial many. The vital few are the small number of causes, inputs, or efforts that generate most of the results, satisfaction, and meaning. The trivial many are everything else, the multitude of activities, possessions, or distractions that take time and energy but contribute very little in return. The challenge most people face is that the trivial many often dominate daily life. They are louder, more urgent, and constantly demanding attention. Emails, notifications, shallow conversations, unnecessary errands, and obligations crowd the day, leaving little room for what truly matters. Without conscious choice, it is easy to end up consumed by these trivial many, mistaking busyness for progress. Yet when the day is over, the real difference in life often comes from just a handful of actions, the vital few that align with one's deepest goals and values. To live effectively, one must learn to distinguish clearly between these two. The vital few are not always obvious because they are often drowned out by the noise of the trivial many. They require reflection and honesty to identify. For instance, in work, perhaps 2 clients generate the majority of income, or a single skill is responsible for most opportunities. In personal life, perhaps 1 or 2 relationships bring the most joy and support, or a small set of habits like exercise, reading, or prayer provide most of the strength and peace. Once identified, the task becomes guarding these vital few fiercely. This often requires sacrifice, saying no to requests, ignoring distractions, or even letting go of activities that once seemed important. It can feel uncomfortable at first because society often values being busy, juggling many things at once, and appearing constantly active. But in truth, mastery comes not from doing more, but from focusing on less, the less that truly matters. The trivial many are not necessarily bad or harmful on their own. They become dangerous only when they are allowed to dominate life, consuming energy and leaving little for what is essential. For example, social media, small tasks, or casual obligations might each seem harmless, but together they can steal hours that could have been invested in the few activities that bring lasting results. Learning to navigate between the vital few and the trivial many is not a one-time decision, but a lifelong practice. It requires regular evaluation, asking questions like, which activities are giving me the greatest return in joy, income, or growth? Which people in my life truly matter most?
What habits or possessions could I let go of without losing anything important? By revisiting these questions, clarity sharpens, and the distinction between the two becomes easier to act upon. The true reward of focusing on the vital few is not just efficiency, it is transformation. When most of one's energy goes to the right places, life feels lighter, clearer, and more purposeful. There is less stress and more impact. Each effort carries more weight because it is invested where it counts. And slowly, the trivial many lose their grip, fading into the background. This shift is not about perfection, but about direction. Each day that is more devoted to the vital few is a step closer to a life of meaning and abundance. The 80-20 principle is not merely a tool for productivity. It is a philosophy of living, one that invites us to stop scattering energy and to focus instead on what truly shapes the course of our lives.
Part 9. The Principle of Least Effort. Nature has a quiet wisdom. Rivers flow along the easiest path, seeking valleys and avoiding resistance. Plants grow toward the light, using the most efficient route to survive. Even animals conserve their energy, hunting only when necessary and resting in between. This is the principle of least effort, the tendency of all systems, including human life, to find the simplest and most energy-efficient way to achieve results. When applied to human behavior, this principle aligns perfectly with the 80-20 way. If most results come from a small number of efforts, then the most effective approach is not to push harder or work longer, but to identify and lean into those efforts that naturally bring the greatest return. In other words, instead of forcing progress through constant struggle, life becomes more productive and satisfying when we flow toward the easiest channels of success. However, modern culture often resists this truth. Many people are conditioned to believe that effort is a measure of worth, that only through struggle, sacrifice, and endless hard work can one achieve anything valuable. Yet, when examined closely, much of this effort is misdirected. It is spent on the trivial many rather than on the vital few. The result is exhaustion without fulfillment, busyness without progress. The principle of least effort is not about laziness or avoiding responsibility. It is about alignment. It asks us to find the natural fit between our strengths, passions, and opportunities. When these align, what once felt like hard labor becomes almost effortless. For example, someone gifted in communication may struggle in a career filled with numbers and analysis, but flourish when speaking, teaching, or persuading. In the right environment, the same person achieves far more with less stress because effort flows naturally. This principle also applies to systems and routines. Consider daily habits. If something requires constant willpower, it is unlikely to last. But if the environment is shaped to make the right choice the easy choice, success requires less effort. For example, keeping healthy food visible while removing unhealthy snacks reduces the strain of self-control. Automating savings or bill payments makes financial discipline almost effortless. The design of life often matters more than the discipline of will. The key is to stop glorifying struggle and to begin honoring simplicity. A task does not have to be difficult to be valuable. In fact, the opposite is often true. The most impactful results often come from the easiest flows, the simple conversation that opens a new door, the one idea that changes a career, or the single relationship that transforms a life. Living by the principle of least effort does not mean avoiding challenge, but it does mean resisting unnecessary complication. It is about recognizing that energy is finite and should be directed where it multiplies, not where it drains. This requires humility, because it often means letting go of pride in working harder than everyone else and embracing the wisdom of working smarter. Ultimately, this principle is liberating. It reminds us that life is not meant to be a constant uphill battle, By seeking the paths of least resistance aligned with the 80-20 rule, we discover that progress does not always demand more force, it demands more clarity. Effort becomes concentrated, results expand, and life takes on a rhythm of ease and abundance. Part 10. Intelligent and lazy. At first glance, the phrase intelligent and lazy might sound contradictory. Society often praises those who are intelligent and hardworking, painting diligence as the ultimate virtue. But Richard Koch presents a strikingly different view, that true effectiveness lies in being both intelligent and lazy. This is not the laziness of neglect or irresponsibility, but a deliberate form of efficiency, the ability to find the easiest way to achieve the best result. History and human behavior provide evidence of this. Many of the greatest innovations were born not out of tireless labor, but out of a desire to simplify life. The invention of the wheel, the printing press, or modern technologies all emerged because someone intelligent refused to accept the harder way of doing things. Instead, they searched for a smarter, easier path. This blend of insight and reluctance to waste energy often outperforms sheer effort. The intelligent and lazy person is not in a hurry to act, but they are quick to think. They pause before plunging into action, asking, "What is the simplest way to get the result I want?" While others may rush into busyness, wearing exhaustion as a badge of honor, the intelligent and lazy person takes time to examine the options, eliminate the unnecessary, and choose the path that yields the greatest impact with the least strain. This principle connects seamlessly to the 80-20 rule. If most results come from a small fraction of effort, then it makes sense to conserve energy for those few actions that truly matter. The intelligent and lazy mindset allows one to resist the temptation of doing more and instead focus only on what makes the greatest difference. In practice, this could mean delegating tasks that others can do better, automating routines, or even eliminating activities that add no real value. One of the reasons this mindset is so powerful is that it challenges the cultural obsession with effort. Many workplaces reward long hours rather than real results. People are celebrated for looking busy rather than for thinking strategically. But busyness is not the same as productivity. In fact, it is often the opposite. The intelligent and lazy person sees through this illusion. They know that the point is not to appear active, but to create meaningful outcomes, and that often requires doing less, not more. There is also a psychological advantage to this approach. By not overloading themselves with trivial tasks, intelligent and lazy people preserve their energy and creativity. They have the mental space to see opportunities others miss. They are less stressed, more focused, and more capable of breakthroughs. Where others burn out chasing minor gains, they advance steadily by concentrating only on what counts. This philosophy also highlights the value of saying no. Intelligent and lazy people are selective about commitments. They decline invitations, tasks, or responsibilities that do not align with their goals or strengths. By doing so, they avoid spreading themselves too thin. Their laziness, when combined with intelligence, becomes a filter that protects their time and energy from being wasted. The true essence of being intelligent and lazy is about respecting one's own life. It is the recognition that time is finite, energy is limited, and not every task is worthy of attention. Rather than trying to conquer the world through sheer willpower, it is about designing life in a way where success flows naturally, with less resistance and more impact. Paradoxically, this attitude often produces far greater achievements than the constant grind. It is not the one who works the hardest, but the one who works the smartest, who reshapes industries, builds wealth, and finds fulfillment. In this sense, the intelligent and lazy mindset is not only practical, it is revolutionary. It turns the old equation of effort and success upside down, proving that the easiest path, when chosen wisely, can also be the most powerful.
Part 11. The top 10 business uses of the 80-20 principle. The 80-20 principle has shaped entire industries, guided remarkable entrepreneurs, and transformed ordinary businesses into global giants. In this part, Richard Koch identifies the 10 most valuable ways this principle can be applied in business. Each use reveals how companies can achieve extraordinary results by focusing on the few activities, customers, and products that generate the greatest rewards. The first and perhaps most vital application is in understanding customers. Not all customers are equal. Some buy more, stay loyal, and generate greater profits, while others demand much but give little in return. By identifying and nurturing the top 20% of customers who account for the majority of revenue, businesses can strengthen relationships and dramatically increase profitability. The smart company does not try to please everyone. It pours energy into delighting its most valuable clients. Second, the principle applies to products. In almost every business, a small fraction of products generates the bulk of sales and profit. Successful firms discover which offerings drive results and concentrate resources there, rather than spreading efforts across an overstuffed catalog. This explains why companies like Apple thrive by perfecting a few products rather than producing many. Third, the 80-20 principle guides sales and marketing. A small proportion of campaigns, messages, or channels produce most of the leads and conversions. Instead of pouring money into wide campaigns, savvy businesses double down on the few strategies that truly work. This makes marketing more efficient and powerful. Fourth, costs and overheads follow the same pattern. A limited number of expenses account for most of the budget. By identifying these and applying controls or creative alternatives, companies can cut costs significantly without damaging performance. Fifth, suppliers and partners also follow the 80-20 rule. Most value is delivered by a handful of reliable partners. Businesses that recognize this can build stronger alliances with key suppliers rather than scattering attention across too many. The sixth use is in time management. Within any organization, a few tasks deliver most of the value. By identifying high-value work and encouraging teams to concentrate on it, businesses can boost productivity without increasing hours. This aligns with the intelligent and lazy mindset, choosing what really counts. Seventh, the principle improves innovation. A few ideas tend to lead to breakthrough success, while most fade. Companies that experiment broadly but quickly identify and scale the winners harness disproportionate rewards. Eighth, the principle applies to employees. A small portion of staff typically generates the most creativity, leadership, or results. Recognizing, rewarding, and retaining these top performers can transform an organization far more than focusing on average contributions. Ninth, the rule influences strategy itself. Instead of chasing every market, successful firms choose the few opportunities with the highest potential.
This selective expansion leads to dominance in key areas rather than mediocrity across many. Finally, the 10th use is in profitability itself. Profit rarely spreads evenly. A few customers, products, or markets generate nearly all of it, while others may even destroy value. The discipline lies in identifying what truly creates profit and letting go of what doesn't. Taken together, these 10 applications reveal why the 80-20 principle is not just a useful idea, but a master key for business success. It simplifies complexity, removes waste, and focuses attention on the few areas that truly matter. The result is not just higher efficiency, but disproportionate growth, an outcome where small, deliberate actions lead to extraordinary results.
Part 12. Why your strategy is wrong. In this part, Richard Koch makes a bold claim. Most business strategies are wrong. Not because leaders are unintelligent, but because they overlook the fundamental imbalance that governs success, the 80-20 principle. Traditional strategy often assumes that effort and reward are proportional, that markets can be tackled evenly, and that every product, customer, or competitor deserves equal attention. But this mindset produces average results at best and wasted effort at worst. The truth, Koch explains, is that strategy must be shaped by identifying the vital few opportunities that generate most of the results. When companies spread themselves too thin across too many products, markets, or activities, they dilute their strength. They fail to recognize that only a few choices truly drive performance. For this reason, many strategies are flawed from the start. They chase growth everywhere instead of focusing where the returns are richest. He illustrates this with examples from business history. Many corporations pursued size for its own sake, acquiring subsidiaries in unrelated industries or producing a vast range of products. They believed that growth itself was the strategy. But such breadth rarely leads to power. Instead, the companies that thrived, like Intel, Coca-Cola, or Microsoft, narrowed their focus to a few areas where they could dominate and reap disproportionate rewards. A wrong strategy, therefore, is often one that targets too many markets instead of a select few, develops too many products instead of refining the ones that customers love, competes head-on with rivals instead of finding unique advantages, assumes all customers are equally valuable instead of cultivating the profitable minority. The correction, Koch argues, is simple but profound. Stop chasing the 80% of opportunities that bring little reward. Instead, build your strategy around the 20% that generate nearly everything. This means daring to ignore certain customers, products, or even entire business units. While this feels risky, it is the only path to extraordinary results. A company's strategy is wrong if it does not consciously apply the 80-20 principle. The right strategy is lean, selective, and laser-focused on where the power truly lies. By identifying the few drivers of success, businesses can multiply their impact with less effort, less waste, and greater clarity. Koch concludes that fixing strategy is not about adding complexity, but about stripping it away. True strategy is about choosing, not everything, but the few things that matter most. And the sooner companies abandon the illusion of equal opportunities, the sooner they can align themselves with the natural love imbalance that governs wealth and power.
Part 13. Exploiting your most profitable assets. Richard Koch emphasizes that every business possesses hidden treasure, though most fail to recognize or properly exploit it. These treasures are the most profitable assets, the products, customers, markets, or capabilities that generate the bulk of results. The tragedy is that leaders often treat all assets equally, devoting time and resources to underperforming areas while neglecting the small core that drives profitability. The 80-20 principle demands a reversal of this tendency. Identify the vital few assets and exploit them to the fullest. He explains that profitable assets take different forms depending on the business.
For some companies, it might be a flagship product that customers adore. For others, it could be a distribution channel that consistently delivers high returns. In yet other cases, it might be a segment of loyal customers who buy repeatedly and recommend the brand. Whatever the form, the point remains. Profits are not spread evenly, but highly concentrated. The path to exponential success lies in doubling down on these winners instead of scattering energy across the unproductive majority. Koch gives examples of companies that have done this brilliantly. Coca-Cola, rather than endlessly diversifying, leaned on its flagship drink, building a global empire from one product. Intel abandoned its broad range of semiconductor products to concentrate on microprocessors, which became its golden goose. Similarly, Apple revived its fortunes by focusing on a small range of standout products like the iPhone and MacBook, investing heavily in design and customer experience instead of maintaining a bloated product line. Each of these cases demonstrates the power of concentrating resources on the few assets that yield the greatest return. Exploiting profitable assets also means shedding or de-emphasizing unprofitable ones. Koch stresses that keeping weak products, serving unprofitable customers, or competing in marginal markets drains resources and distracts from the real drivers of wealth. Courage is required here. Companies often cling to underperforming areas out of habit or misplaced loyalty. But the 80-20 rule shows that pruning the weak creates space for the strong to flourish. The principle extends beyond products and customers. It also applies to employees, suppliers, and processes. Within every organization, there are a handful of star performers who create disproportionate value. These individuals deserve more recognition, resources, and freedom to operate. By contrast, much of the bureaucracy and many low-performing staff add little but consume much. Exploiting profitable assets means empowering the few people and processes that truly matter while reducing dependence on the rest. Koch warns, however, that exploitation is not the same as complacency. Businesses must continually search for new high-value assets as old ones decline. The winners of today may not remain winners forever, so leaders must be alert, innovative, and ready to shift focus as the landscape changes. Still, the guiding principle remains. Success comes not from spreading effort thinly, but from intensifying focus on the most profitable sources of value. At its core, this part of the book calls for clarity and discipline. The greatest profits lie not in working harder or expanding endlessly, but in recognizing where the power already lies and harnessing it with ruthless focus. The companies that exploit their most profitable assets not only grow wealth faster, but also build resilience because they are aligned with the natural asymmetry that governs business success.
Part 14. Cutting the Cost of Complexity. Richard Koch explains that complexity is one of the greatest silent killers of efficiency and profitability in business. Left unchecked, complexity creeps into organizations as they expand products, services, processes, and systems. Managers often assume that more choice, more features, and more operations equal more growth. But the reality, seen through the 80-20 lens, is that complexity usually adds costs, confusion, and inefficiency far more than it adds value. Koch points out that most businesses could operate with a fraction of their current activities without losing much, if anything, of importance. Just as 20% of products typically generate 80% of sales, only a small portion of organizational processes genuinely add value. Yet companies often continue to maintain layers of procedures, reporting systems, product lines, and customer segments that drain resources without providing proportional returns. Complexity manifests in several ways. Product complexity. When companies introduce too many products or variations, inventory, manufacturing, and logistics costs skyrocket. Customers may also become overwhelmed with choice, leading to decision fatigue rather than increased sales. Organizational complexity. Multiple management layers, committees, and bureaucratic procedures often paralyze decision-making. Instead of speed and agility, the company drowns in administration. Customer complexity. Serving too many types of customers or markets dilutes focus. The result is that core profitable customers receive less attention while marginal ones consume disproportionate resources. Systems complexity. Overly complicated IT, reporting structures, or compliance measures often create more work for staff than they eliminate, slowing innovation and responsiveness. Koch suggests the businesses should embrace simplicity as a strategy. The most successful companies tend to focus tightly on a few profitable areas and eliminate or outsource the rest. He cites Southwest Airlines as an example. By operating a single type of aircraft and avoiding complex ticketing systems, the airline dramatically cut costs while offering customers a simpler, more reliable service. IKEA followed a similar path by offering a limited but carefully curated product line, reducing manufacturing and logistics complexity while delivering affordability and style. The 80-20 principle highlights that most complexity is not only unnecessary, but actively harmful. It diverts energy away from the core profit engines, slows down innovation, and burdens employees with low-value tasks. By contrast, cutting complexity often brings surprising benefits: lower costs, higher productivity, greater employee morale, and better customer satisfaction. Koch urges managers to regularly audit complexity. Which products could be discontinued without damaging profits? Which customers are too costly to serve? Which processes could be eliminated or radically simplified? The answers to these questions often reveal opportunities to cut costs dramatically without touching the activities that actually generate wealth. Ultimately, the lesson is clear. Simplicity scales. Complexity destroys. Organizations that simplify around their most profitable products, customers, and processes are far more likely to thrive in the long term. They not only save money, but also become more agile, more innovative, and more aligned with the natural power laws of business.
Part 15. Information Technology and the 80-20 Principle. Richard Koch emphasizes that information technology has amplified the power of the 80-20 principle more than any other force in modern business. Technology enables individuals and organizations to gather, analyze, and apply information in ways that reveal the hidden 80-20 patterns faster and more accurately. What once took years of intuition and experience can now be identified almost instantly through data-driven insights. In many businesses, a small portion of data reveals the majority of what needs to be known. For example, customer data often shows that a tiny segment of buyers accounts for the bulk of revenue. With IT systems, companies can identify those key customers quickly and serve them better, while reducing attention to less profitable ones. Retailers like Amazon excel at this by tracking consumer behavior and personalizing recommendations, which not only increases sales, but also reduces wasted marketing spend. Koch explains that IT enables businesses to automate low-value tasks, reducing the drag of complexity. Repetitive administrative processes can be digitized, freeing people to focus on creative, high-value work. IT also provides real-time feedback, allowing managers to see immediately which strategies are working and which are not, ensuring that effort is redirected toward the few initiatives that deliver the greatest return. Importantly, IT also reshapes entire industries through network effects and winner-takes-all dynamics, phenomena that are themselves rooted in 80-20 patterns. A small number of platforms like Google, Microsoft, or Facebook dominate their sectors not because they do everything, but because they do a few things exceptionally well and attract disproportionate user bases. Once a critical mass is reached,
success compounds rapidly, and competitors struggle to keep up. Koch also notes that IT makes outsourcing and specialization more efficient. Businesses can now focus narrowly on their core competencies, while leveraging global networks for everything else. This mirrors the essence of the 80-20 principle, doing less but achieving more by concentrating resources on what truly matters. However, technology also introduces risks if misapplied. Companies often invest in expensive IT systems that create new layers of complexity instead of simplifying. Data overload is another danger. Having too much information can obscure rather than clarify priorities unless leaders deliberately filter for the critical 20% that drives outcomes. Koch's central message is that IT should not be pursued for its own sake, but should serve as a tool to amplify focus. It should be used to identify the vital few customers, products, and processes that generate most value, and to eliminate or automate the trivial many. Firms that embrace this approach harness IT not just for efficiency, but for strategic clarity and competitive advantage. In essence, the fusion of information technology with the 80-20 principle provides unprecedented opportunities. It allows individuals and organizations to simplify operations, magnify strengths, and achieve extraordinary results with less effort. Those who learn to use IT through the lens of 80-20 thinking will be far ahead of those who drown in data without focus.
Part 16. The Universe Inside Your Head. The 80-20 principle is not just an external law governing business, economics, or productivity. It is also an internal truth. The greatest leverage is found within the mind, in the way we think, perceive, and interpret reality. This part of the book explores how the universe inside your head, your thoughts, beliefs, and mental models shapes the outer universe of your actions and results. The first key insight is that perception precedes reality. Our brains do not simply record facts, they interpret them, filter them, and give them meaning. Two people can experience the same event but walk away with completely different conclusions, one seeing opportunity where the other sees only failure. This divergence arises because the universe inside the head acts as a lens through which everything is refracted. The 80-20 principle applies here as well. A small fraction of our beliefs, assumptions, and attitudes produces the vast majority of our life outcomes. If we can identify and reshape these vital few mental constructs, we can change the trajectory of our lives. The chapter emphasizes that wealth, success, and happiness are not only determined by external effort, but by the clarity of thought. For example, if an entrepreneur believes that wealth can only come from grinding effort, they may pour themselves into long hours but overlook smarter, more leveraged strategies. Conversely, someone who recognizes the power of leverage, networks, and compounding may work less in raw hours but achieve far greater results. The key difference lies not in the external world but in the structure of thought. Richard Koch introduces the idea that we must cultivate mental leverage, focusing on the few thoughts that matter most. This means questioning our assumptions, noticing where beliefs limit us, and actively replacing them with perspectives that open opportunities. Just as the 80-20 principle guides us to cut away low-value activities, the same principle urges us to eliminate low-value thinking, negative self-talk, limiting beliefs, and mental clutter. What remains is a smaller but far more potent set of ideas that drive progress. Another dimension of the universe in your head is imagination. Our capacity to envision possibilities allows us to create new realities. The businesses, technologies, and institutions that shape the world began as thoughts in someone's mind. But not every thought carries equal weight. Once again, a few insights are transformative, while most fade into irrelevance. By training the mind to recognize and nurture breakthrough ideas, we harness the internal fractal factor. Inside the sea of thoughts, a small set leads to extraordinary outcomes.
The book also suggests that happiness itself is largely mental. External conditions matter, but studies show that mindset, gratitude, and interpretation account for the majority of lasting contentment. If we allow the mind to dwell on scarcity, failure, or envy, no amount of external success will satisfy. If instead we cultivate appreciation, focus on progress, and nurture meaningful connections, our inner universe radiates joy regardless of circumstances. Finally, Koch stresses the power of self-awareness. By observing our own thinking, we can detect the distortions and biases that pull us off course. Self-reflection enables us to continually refine our mental models, much like peeling back the layers of the 80-20 fractal. The more we align our inner universe with clarity, purpose, and focus, the more the outer universe conforms to our vision. The lesson of this part is clear. The greatest leverage lies not outside, but inside. To change the world, change your thoughts. To multiply results, refine your beliefs. To experience happiness, direct your mind to the vital few truths that generate most of life's meaning. The universe inside your head, if mastered, becomes the most powerful 80-20 tool of all.
Part 17. Your Hidden Friend. At this stage, the book introduces a fascinating concept: your unconscious mind as your hidden friend. The conscious mind is powerful, but it is also limited. It can only process a small amount of information at any given moment, whereas the unconscious mind handles a vast ocean of data, silently, efficiently, and often more accurately than deliberate reasoning. The 80-20 principle applies here as well. A small proportion of our conscious effort, when aligned with the deeper resources of the unconscious, can produce an outsized share of results. Richard Koch emphasizes that the unconscious mind is not a mysterious enemy, as sometimes portrayed, but a reservoir of intelligence, creativity, and intuition. It stores years of experience, recognizes patterns the conscious mind overlooks, and often nudges us toward solutions before we can rationally explain them. Many great breakthroughs in science, art, and business have occurred when someone allowed their unconscious to do the heavy lifting. Einstein credited imagination and intuition as much as logic, and countless inventors have reported sudden flashes of insight after a period of incubation. The lesson here is that by learning to trust and partner with this hidden friend, we can multiply our effectiveness. Instead of relying solely on conscious, grinding effort, we can adopt a more relaxed, balanced rhythm that allows the unconscious to surface solutions. This explains why taking a break, sleeping on a problem, or engaging in unrelated activities often leads to sudden clarity. The unconscious continues working in the background, filtering information and connecting dots until the answer emerges. But how do we cultivate this hidden ally? Koch suggests several strategies. Ask your mind good questions. The quality of the input determines the quality of the output. Instead of obsessing over problems, frame them as challenges to be solved. Pose the question clearly to yourself, then let it go. The unconscious will work on it in its own time. Create space for incubation. Overloading the conscious mind blocks access to deeper insights. Activities like walking, meditating, or engaging in a hobby allow the unconscious to bring forward its contributions. Trust intuition. While not infallible, intuition often reflects accumulated knowledge and pattern recognition that the conscious mind cannot articulate. The key is to balance it with rational analysis, using each where it is strongest. Notice recurring signals. When a thought or idea keeps resurfacing, it may be the unconscious signaling something important. Paying attention to these patterns often reveals the next right step. The unconscious is also closely tied to emotions. Whereas the conscious mind uses logic, the unconscious communicates through feelings, hunches, and subtle nudges. Recognizing and interpreting these signals is essential. For instance, a persistent unease about a business deal may indicate overlooked risks, while excitement about an idea can signal alignment with values and opportunities. Ultimately, this part of the book encourages readers to see the unconscious not as something to suppress or control, but as a partner in success. The 80-20 principle shows us that most results come from a vital few inputs. Likewise, most progress comes not from constant conscious effort, but from learning how to unlock and channel the deeper power already within us. By embracing your hidden friend, you gain access to a source of creativity, clarity, and guidance that far exceeds what the conscious mind can achieve alone. Success, happiness, and breakthroughs then become not just the product of effort, but of alignment between the conscious and the unconscious, a true 80-20 synergy inside the mind.
Conclusion: the timeless power of the 80-20 principle. The journey through the 80-20 principle reveals more than a mathematical curiosity. It uncovers a universal law of imbalance, that a minority of inputs, efforts, and resources create the majority of results, rewards, and fulfillment. Far from being a limitation, this imbalance is a hidden advantage. By identifying and focusing on the few factors that truly matter, we can achieve more with less, improve our lives with less struggle, and enjoy a sense of clarity in a complex world. Richard Koch demonstrates that this principle operates in every sphere: business, economics, personal effectiveness, relationships, happiness, and even in the workings of the mind. In business, a small percentage of customers or products drive most profits. In life, a handful of activities and relationships produce most of our joy. Within ourselves, tapping into the unconscious mind provides breakthroughs that effort alone cannot. The deeper message is one of choice and focus. Most people scatter their time and energy across trivial activities, mistaking busyness for progress. But those who discipline themselves to concentrate on the vital few harness a compounding advantage. They not only achieve greater material success, but also carve out the space for reflection, freedom, and happiness. The principle is not about working harder, but about working smarter, eliminating the unnecessary, doubling down on what matters, and trusting the natural forces of leverage that already shape our world. It is also not confined to productivity or profit. Koch extends the insight to meaning and fulfillment. If we identify the few relationships, passions, and practices that enrich us most and nurture them deliberately, we create a life of disproportionate joy. In the end, the 80-20 principle is both a strategy and a philosophy. It teaches us to see patterns where others see chaos, to prioritize rather than overextend, and to unlock hidden resources, whether in markets, organizations, or within our own minds. More than a tool, it is a way of thinking, a lens that clarifies the world and simplifies decision-making. If there is one lasting takeaway, it is this: small, focused efforts can lead to extraordinary outcomes. Mastering this truth allows us to step off the treadmill of excess effort, discover the hidden levers of success, and live with purpose and freedom. You now know the timeless truth of the 80-20 principle, that a few actions, a few relationships, and a few choices shape most of the results in your life. The question is no longer if this principle works, because it always does. The real question is, will you use it? Look at your day, your work, your goals, and your dreams. Identify the small handful of things that truly move the needle for you, and then give them your full attention. Let go of the noise, the clutter, and the endless busyness. Focus on the vital few, and you will create extraordinary results with less effort than you ever imagined. If you found value in this lesson, take a moment right now to commit to action. Write down the one thing that matters most in your life today, and do it with focus, energy, and clarity. Because success and happiness are not about doing more. They are about doing less better. If this audiobook summary has inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs this message. And in the comments, tell us, what is the one vital few you will focus on starting today?